I'm Cece. I'm a registered dietitian here with Kanema Fitness, and this month we're going to talk about environmental health and nutrition. So the environment and sustainability is so important, and one way that we can help kind of reduce carbon emissions is by eating foods that are local to us. I know we talked about that last month, but supporting our local farmers and producers is a great way to get involved in our community and also reduce our carbon footprint. Another way to promote a more sustainable lifestyle could be incorporating more plant-based proteins. So today we're gonna make a recipe for tofu, and it has a little bit of an Asian twist with it. So we're gonna use some fun ingredients to make the sauce, and we're gonna add in some vegetables and a side of rice as well to complete the full meal. So let's follow along and make the recipe. Okay, so we're gonna start with the tofu. So I have extra firm tofu, and what I did first was I just slit with a knife in the corner a little hole in the package so I could drain it. And now I'm gonna undo the whole package and pat the tofu dry. So you can pat the tofu dry with either a cloth that's meant for baking, or so like one of the thin rice cloths, or you can use paper towels. And so you're just gonna pat it dry and then cut it into cubes. So I'm just gonna dry it off really quickly. You don't need to press the tofu for this recipe. You can if you'd like, up to you and your preference. So I'm just gonna go ahead, now that it's all dry, press it onto a plate and then cut it into little cubes. So here's my block of tofu. I'm just gonna cut it into some good size cubes. You can do this to however big or small you want, or based off of how many cubes in total you want. I'm gonna do 4 rows, and then probably 4 rows of 4. So that ends up giving me an ounce cube. So that is all set. I'm gonna separate them. And then our next step with this, I have all the ingredients ready to go. So I have 3 tablespoons of breadcrumbs. You can use whatever breadcrumbs you like. If you are gluten-free, they have gluten-free breadcrumbs out there. If you have any sort of aversion to any sort of bread or grain products, you can find one that fits you. You can also use quinoa flakes if you want a little extra protein. So there's a lot of options on the market, and you can substitute with whatever feels best for you. But I'm just using normal breadcrumbs for this. So I have my breadcrumbs, 3 tablespoons. And then I also have 3 tablespoons of flour. You can also use cornstarch, but I didn't have cornstarch on hand, so I figured I would just use the flour that I had on hand. And then I also have 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. So you can use soy sauce or tamari sauce, whatever works best for you. I always recommend trying to find the low sodium option, just to make it a little bit more heart healthy, but so you can try to find whatever fits your dietary guidelines out at the store. So now we're gonna go ahead and coat the tofu. So to coat the tofu, I'm just gonna take the cube of tofu, put it in the tamari sauce, and then coat it with some of the cornstarch or flour, whatever you're using. And then put it in the breadcrumb. And then that'll get it all toasted. So I should mention that right now my oven is preheating at 400. So once we're done with all of this, then we'll place it on a baking sheet and put it in the oven for about 25 to 35 minutes, depending on the heat of your oven and how fast your oven works. But I'm gonna get all this situated, and then I'll show you what it looks like on the baking tray before I put it in. Okay, so they're coated and now lined on my baking sheet, so I try to space them out as much as possible so that they get nice and crispy on the outside. So I'm gonna go ahead and place them in the oven. Again, this is gonna be for about 25 to 35 minutes, depending on how quickly your oven is able to cook them. So I wanna look for a dark crispy outside just to make sure that it's a nice level of crunch. And then once these are in, we're gonna get started on the sauce and the sides. Okay, we're gonna get ahead with the sauce. So I'm gonna add my tamari. So I have 1/3 cup of tamari. I'm just gonna add into a bowl. I'm also gonna add my sesame seed oil into the bowl. And last but not least, I am gonna add some honey. So I have a couple teaspoons of honey. That's gonna give it its thick flavor or thick texture. Oh, last thing, I forgot, rice vinegar. I'm gonna add that into the mixture. And so right now I have some minced garlic that is on the stove right now. And so it's on medium heat in a saucepan. And so I'm just waiting for it to get to that nice aroma, and we'll mix it all together and get to add this to that mixture shortly. So I'm gonna stir this, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add my cornstarch and 2 tablespoons of water to the pan before I add this. Okay, so I'm all set with my sauce. It came to a boil, and so once the tofu's done, I'm gonna put the tofu into the saucepan and make sure it gets all coated, and then I'm all set with the tofu. I'm gonna go ahead and prep my vegetables. So I prepared some bok choy and some mushrooms for this recipe because I thought that it has a nice flavor profile that goes well with the sauces. So I'm basically just kind of taking the same ingredients that I used for the tofu and the sauce and using that to amplify the flavors of the bok choy and the mushrooms. So I'm gonna take the tamari and the rice vinegar and just use portions of that to saute the bok choy. So when I cut the bok choy, I'm cutting it down the middle, and then I'm going to place it flat on the pan. And so the part where I cut is gonna go face down on the pan for the first part of the cooking process. From there, I'm gonna flip it over so that that is now facing up. And it really only takes about 5, 10, 15 minutes max to make, depending on what heat you're using. I'm gonna use a lower heat so it gets nice and warm and it kind of cooks all the way through. And I'm just going to kind of use the amount of tamari and rice vinegar that it needs based off of the size that I get, because each size is a little bit different. So I'm gonna go ahead and chop it, and I'll show you what I mean by preparing it. So here's the bok choy. So I'm just gonna make a slice right through here. This is honestly a pretty big piece of bok choy, so I could even cut it more into quarters if I wanted to. So this is the part that's going to be placed on the pan when I saute to start, and this will be face up towards the sky. So that is that. I'm just going to put a little bit of extra virgin olive oil onto my pan, and then saute it and add a little bit of the rice vinegar and a little bit of the tamari just for a little bit of extra flavors. And then I'll be all set. So we are all set with our meal. We have some brown rice, shiitake mushrooms, bok choy, and our sesame garlic tofu. I hope you enjoy.